Hello and welcome to the Pig Edge, Teagasc Pig podcast with me, Ciarán Carroll, bringing you all the latest news, information and advice to keep Irish pig farmers up to date. And for this episode, we're looking at energy use on pig farms with Damien Fowley and David Fitzgerald from Exemplar Energy Solutions. And I first asked Damien, what are the main contributors of energy use on pig farms?
Yeah, Ciarán, we've done some load analysis on this for pig farmer clients of ours to identify the main contributors of energy usage and where the energy is being drawn down on pig farms. It's quite interesting because you can have the farmers then identify where some energy efficiencies can be made. Sometimes there's some surprises on what's actually drawn down the energy, and it would otherwise go undetected if you hadn't done the load analysis. So to give you an example of a large pig farm where we did some load analysis for the farmer, the percentage of energy that was drawn down by lighting was 18% and heating 15%. Now, in our experience, farmers would expect that to be much higher. They'd be surprised. Ventilation, for example, on this farm was 29%, and then the feed pumps and the motors was 20%. So sometimes it's a worthwhile exercise, especially if the equipment on the farm is quite old. It's worth looking into.
Very good. Yeah, that is interesting. As you say, you would expect the lighting and heating to be higher, maybe. Just moving on then, when do you get your gas bill, your electricity bill? What should pig farmers be looking out for when they get their bill?
With the farmers, they're probably all with different suppliers and they're on different tariffs. They still, though, should have some commonality across their bills and some things that are generic. So the first thing, obviously, their eyes are drawn to are the unit rates and the standing charges, which form the majority part of the cost of the bills. The unit rate, they should be checking to see whether they're in contract or not. If they're out of contract, it'll be very apparent on the bill straight away, because an out of contract rate could sometimes be up to 4 or 5 cents more per unit that they're drawn down, be it a day rate or a night rate or a summer rate or a winter rate. So it's very important that they check that. I suppose have a look at the rates themselves, see if they're in contract. If they are in contract, and again, the suppliers will frame it differently, but make sure that the correct contract rate that they've agreed to has been applied. Sometimes that can be through the rate being discounted, and they might need to double check that. But it's worthwhile, I suppose, really getting into the detail of it and seeing what charges there are on the various suppliers. Like, some of them will frame it differently. They'll have a ISOM charge, for example, where others won't. Again, the day and night rates and summer and winter rates, depending on the tariff they're on, the more they study the bill and they get a little bit of familiarity with it, they'll spot then very quickly going forward whether there's been any errors, or if, as I said, that there's a chance that they've gone into out of contract. One of the things that we find in this industry is the contract expiry date won't be flagged to the customer. So a lot of the times they might unintentionally slip into a period where they're on a default out of contract rate, and they can be quite punitive. One of the items we get a lot of frustration with is where the farmers will say they're constantly getting estimates, and the estimates can be, I suppose it can be frustrating because they think it's around the usage around the time that they've been pulling down the energy, but a lot of the time it can be on the previous calendar year. So it's a very simple thing to avoid being on estimates. It's just taking the time to go and get the reads, take the reads and submit them into ESB networks or gas networks, so that they know when they get their bill in, it's on an actual read. Now, that's on obviously non-quarterly hour meters. You'll have those farmers the larger farmers who are on quarterly hour, and the reads are done remotely. But for your smaller farmers who have general purpose night savers, it's a handy tip to keep in mind in that respect. And the last one, it's probably a little bit more technical when you start getting into this area, but it's to look at the MIC is set correctly. So they should be looking at the maximum KVA that they're using. It'll be more than one bill, so they'd look at 12 months bills over this period, and just to see what's the maximum drawdown on the usage and whether the MIC is set correctly, because if it's too high, they might be paying charges unnecessarily, and it's something that can be reviewed by them looking at the bills. But again, if it's a larger farmer, you can who has a quarterly hour, you can pull data from the likes of ESP networks and get the MRSO data. We can review that for them. So they're probably the main things to keep in mind, Ciarán.
Very good, yeah. So well worth spending time there. And now, David, if I could ask you about renewables, which seems to be a hot topic at the moment, can you give us a flavour of what's going on there with renewables? Maybe starting with solar energy.
The renewable electricity industry has been going in Ireland since basically the early 90s, when the government first started supporting the industry. In recent years, I guess there's been substantially more traction. There's a lot more public awareness and a lot more kind of urgency on the science side around climate change, and it's kind of been translated a lot into policy in terms of ambitions. So, for example, up until 2020, the government target for renewable electricity was to be 40% renewable, which we probably haven't met. We're probably thereabouts, but not quite achieved that target. This now has increased for the next 10 years to 70%. So it's an enormous technical challenge, but there's a lot of activity to work towards that target. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the next decade. So like there's various schemes that are put in place to realize this ambition in terms of grant funding and operational support for larger wind farms and solar farms. But policy aside, there's been some significant technological advances as well, both in price and efficiency, and they've really made renewables very competitive with fossil fuel generation or more traditional forms of generation in recent years. And solar is a good case in point for Ireland, because people wouldn't really associate Ireland with hours and hours of sunshine every day, but the fact is that the solar panels have dropped in the last 10 years. They've dropped by about 80% in price, and during that time as well, there's been ongoing efficiency gains as manufacturing techniques and the science behind them gets more refined. So we're kind of left in a place now where the market is actually really starting to get a bit of traction in the last couple of years. There's a lot of solar projects being installed at the moment, and it's really kind of hit a point where these projects make sense on their own without government support, which is why a lot of our clients have opted to kind of invest in solar electricity.
And what about biomass as an energy source?
Yeah, so biomass is considered a carbon neutral energy source in that you're burning wood basically, which is releasing carbon dioxide, but you're replenishing that by basically growing it again and putting it back into the system. So it's kind of a circular system that's carbon neutral. So this is relevant to pig farms to supply heating needs. So if it would take the form of a wood chip or wood pellet boiler as an alternative to gas or oil, standard gas or oil boilers. There's a few key differences. The fuel is bulkier, obviously, It's more difficult to handle, and it requires more space to store because it's just less energy dense than gas or oil. There's also a lot of moving parts, or a lot more moving parts in the systems, which make them a bit trickier to maintain. But on the other hand, last year, the government introduced a brand new support scheme for this technology. It's called the Support Scheme for Renewable Heat. Under this scheme, the user is paid per kilowatt hour of heat output, and this is guaranteed for a 15-year period. So the rationale behind this basically is to kind of compensate the user for the additional expense and maintenance costs associated with the technology. So it basically designed to provide an incentive for people to uptake the technology, but it's actually it's a good scheme for the right user, and it's you could expect depending on your usage, anywhere between 15,000 and 25,000 income a year through the support scheme payments. So it's if you're currently on oil or gas, it's definitely worth looking into.
Okay, yeah. And is wind energy an option for pig farms?
Yeah, it is, but it might be. It's potentially more difficult to source suitable technology at the scale required. So I've looked at wind for a couple of pig units, but they tend to be more suited towards a larger scale. Anything sizing, 1 million units a year and above, and that might be, a pig farm with 2,500 sows. So it's sort of on the larger end of it. The reason is the leading turbine manufacturers have kind of continuously increased the size of their turbines over the past number of decades, just due to economies of scale. So it's difficult to find turbines that are small enough to that would be suited to the load profile of a pig farm. There are some options at smaller scales, but the price per kilowatt tends to be a little bit high, and they may be from less proven manufacturers. So it's difficult to find solutions. There's one interesting market though. It's the refurbished turbine market. It's basically where smaller turbines, which had been installed possibly in the early 90s on some of the first wind farms, are kind of reaching the end of their design life now and being decommissioned. These are sold on a secondary market and are acquired by engineering companies who basically refurbish them and bring them back up to their original design life, and then they're sold to commercial and industrial clients for producing electricity direct to the site. So the benefit here is basically the cost is a lot lower than a new turbine of the same rated capacity. A lot of them they might be dated in terms of technology, but they would have been originally manufactured to high standards by good companies, and the people who are refurbishing them are provided that they're doing so appropriately and taking the correct care and bringing them back up to their design life. You could be left with a good product that will may suit the low profile to a pig unit. But again, it's probably on the larger scale of pig farms that you'd be looking at investigating this technology.
Very good. And on grants, what type of grants are available for these systems?
Yeah, typically the main ones to look at for pig farms would be the TAMS grant, which I'm sure most of your listeners would be familiar with, but that would be up to 40% capital costs. And then on the other side, there's the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland have several grant schemes where up to 30% capital costs are available. There's two schemes in particular, the Better Energy Community schemes and the Exceed scheme. both will fund up to 30% capital costs of these types of projects.
Okay. And finally, David, for yourself, what 3 tips would you give for pig farmers to think of with regards to energy usage?
Yeah, number one, I think I'd advise to initially look at rooting out inefficiencies before considering renewable generation. There's no point in installing a 100 kilowatt solar array if it's powering inefficient equipment. So, look at variable speed drive for ventilation fans, LED lighting if you're still on fluorescent, and other inefficiencies such as compressed air leaks. I kind of concentrate on rooting those out first, and then move on to renewables once you've addressed any efficiencies on site. Number two, I just look at the load profile of your site and select a renewable technology which best matches it. Now, in my experience, pig farms have a fairly steady load profile, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which is actually ideally suited to renewables because it reduces the time where there's excess supply to meet demand. So I'd look at it in a bit more detail. Like if you have daytime peaks or increased usage in the summer, that's something that would be obviously suited to solar. The third tip would be just if you're getting proposals from equipment suppliers, I'd advise you to get a second opinion on the estimated savings. Sometimes they tend to be on the optimistic side. So I'd just keep a close eye on that as well.
Very good. Thanks, David. So, Damien, just back to yourself there. Can you tell us a little bit about Exemplar Energy Solutions, the type of clients you cater for, how you originated, etc.?
Sure, absolutely, Ciarán. So we're an Irish-owned company based in Cork, but we've offices in Limerick, Kilkenny and Dublin. The company was set up in 2008 by 2 brothers, Jonathan and Vincent Fitzpatrick. So obviously a family-owned business, and they recognised as the energy market entered the deregulation phase that there was a need for a broker service out there for clients. So trading since 2008, and we specialise in the effective procurement of gas and electricity for all sectors, SME, agriculture. We've 12 staff, and that includes energy analysts, chartered accountants, chartered engineers, energy traders. And I myself joined the company in 2018, look after the Leinster region, and the Kilkenny office with David here today. And we cater for all commercial energy users that are pulling down large amounts of energy. So it's industries ranging from the likes of quarries, manufacturers, pharma, retail groups, food and drink companies, and then obviously farms.
And do you have pig farms as clients?
We do. We have quite a lot of farms as clients, but especially pig farm clients throughout the country that myself and my colleagues Jonathan and Pat look after. Pig farmers, they're quite good at speaking to each other, and they seem to have a good community, and they've referred us to each other. So we look at after pig farms of all sizes, really, from new startups to established large operators.
Very good. And finally, where can farmers find out more information if they're interested in following up on this?
Yeah, I think as David mentioned, on the renewables, the sustainable energy website of Ireland is a good resource to check out. Ourselves, we're available at www.exemplarenergy.ie. And obviously, if any of the listeners, the pig farmers, they want to get in touch through yourself to get our own contact details, we'd be delighted to talk to them.
Okay, very good. Thanks, lads. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for the latest episode of The Pig Age, and my thanks to Damien Fowley and David Fitzgerald for joining me on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss a show. And for more information on farming, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Ciarán Carroll, and thanks for listening.